USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Weekend Review podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com. A look at this weekend in college hockey and a review of the top news of the week.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, February 21st, 2022. This podcast is brought to you by Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting DCU.org. Membership required. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. And gentlemen, I saw this right away this morning as I was trying to fill out my poll ballot. Sweeps were pretty tough to come by over the weekend for top teams. Some teams had a pretty tough weekend. We'll mention St. Cloud State in a moment, but Michigan swept Ohio State. Minnesota had a two-game series of wins over Penn State. Minnesota State swept Bemidji and won the CCHA. North Dakota with a sweep against UMD, and Notre Dame with Michigan State. Those are the only top 20 teams with sweeps. Omaha, which had ducked out of the top 20, had a sweep over St. Cloud State, which has got to make things a little tough there for the Huskies. But why is it so tough? Is it just parity? Is it what's the story here?
This is the time of the year that you really want to separate yourselves. And back in the day, you'd say, well, you need to get 4 points this weekend. Now it's you need to get 6. But really, it comes down to the fact of trying to take as many points possible. If you can get the majority of the points, 4 points compared to 2 points, or even 5 and 6 points, that's massive in standings wise. And I think people are jockeying for playoff spots. They know where they stand. They know what they have to do. And it's hard to get, it's hard to sweep teams, especially when everybody wants to be playing their best hockey headed into playoffs. And I think you saw it. If you get, you look at a series, Air Force and Bentley, I followed that one this weekend because it was the Battle of the Falcons. But Air Force had a big lead. Bentley came back and salvaged 2 points. Those are big in standings. And to be able to get those points late. And if you just look around the nation, those points, it's hard to get 6 points in a weekend now.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes to what you're saying there, Derek, is that I think there's just desperation on the part of teams. If you fall in that first night, you really want to find a way to come back the second night. I look at Western Michigan, loses the first to Denver, but gets the win on the second night. UConn, which, that's a team that's fighting to try to get to the top of the hockey standings. They're fighting for their NCAA tournament life, the first bid that school could ever have in the program's history. They lose to UMass at home on Friday night, and they come back with a great road effort, find a way to, get a late goal in that game and win it 4-2. Those are the types of performances that kind of reek of desperation. You're just trying to find a way. You're hungry because you're desperate. And I think that's what we see at this time of the year. Not that we don't see it in November, but I think it just becomes, highlighted a little bit more. We can feel it. You can see teams on the ice play with a little bit more urgency than sometimes you see on a Saturday night after you've dropped that Friday game back in November or December.
But I will say this, the thing that people don't understand is you're playing with desperation and urgency now, but the points that you lose in October and November put you in that desperation and urgency now. And I would always say that in the locker room. I'd say, guys, this one is going to bite us eventually. Mark my words. This one will bite us. And you will always have. I remember us a couple of years ago we had to get 2 wins, and we had to have a whole bunch of things happen. And next thing you know, we've got a home ice. We've got home ice in the first round because of all that did happen. And one of the players said to me, he goes, well, I guess that loss that we had in October really didn't bite us. I'm like, well, it bit us because we would have not had to worry, and we would have been even higher in the standings. So those losses that happen in November, October, that you everybody in the media and everybody in the fans just chalk up as that happens, that could cost you big time.
North Dakota moved into first place in the NCHC by 2 points over Denver, with Denver split and North Dakota's sweep. When we talked on the Game of the Week podcast with Dave Starman, he was highlighting, and we were highlighting with him, the terrific coaching job Brad Berry has done with North Dakota, with, losing a lot of players at the beginning of the season, having a lot of injuries and having Jake Sanderson gone for the Olympics.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with North Dakota, and we're going to get into some stuff in the second half of the show, talking about teams that we think can make a run. But, you saw it this weekend. That's a very tough opponent for them to play in Minnesota Duluth, to do it on the road, to get those 2 wins. And maybe Duluth is reeling a little bit right now, but North Dakota is soaring, and they've had some real empty moments of their season. They had a long losing streak back in January that probably it felt uncharacteristic and certainly didn't feel good. But I look at getting that team back on the right track. And now, I mean, we were talking about them as a PairWise bubble team for a long time. I feel like they've shored up their national picture a little bit, and now they're sitting in first place in the NCHC. That's pretty good. They've made some great strides.
Yeah, I mean, we've been critical of some teams with the ECAC as a league. North Dakota, we kind of, if we were doing the buy or sell a couple weeks ago, a lot of us probably would have been selling. And usually North Dakota gets it going this time of year. And we talked just now about points that hurt you. Obviously, these points didn't hurt North Dakota, and they're playing their best hockey at the right time. And that's important. I mean, I think the biggest thing that you look at is, the history and the experience they have in these situations. And they're going to have the experience heading down. I mean, this has got to be that long overtime game that they lost last year has got to be eating at some of the older guys. And, they know that this is an opportunity to take it in a new step and kind of write their book in a different way. And, I'd rather have a long losing streak and struggle in the middle than do it at the end. You don't want to be leaking oil coming to the playoff time. But Dave Starman, that's interesting. Dave's kind of blowing up Twitter today with all his opinions on USA hockey and youth hockey and icing on the penalty kill. And he's been outspoken lately, that Dave.
Yeah, every so often he'll pop up with some outspokenness. I remember a couple of years ago when he wanted to ban diving to block shots. I don't know if that'll come back around, but he certainly can attract the social media attention.
The old Tim Whitehead, just like Red Berenson used to want to put the tennis chairs up on the blue lines and have those as the linesmen. There's some interesting. We'll be getting into that point of the time where I believe this is a rule change year, so maybe we'll see some things that are different that are proposed, and hopefully they don't tinker with the game very much this year.
I could just picture a player pulling the John McEnroe and looking up at the chair and say, "Are you kidding me?"
Well, I was on that rules committee that did put the no PK in the on icing on the penalty kill way back when, and it went over like a bomb. I mean, nobody wanted it. It ended up changing, and now you see it in youth hockey. So Dave's on his kick today about changing some of the youth hockey rules, and thank God we didn't get it in college hockey, because I was one against it.
Well, one other place I want to mention in the NCHC is the battle for fourth place. Now, it looked like it would be bad for St. Cloud State getting swept by Omaha. They're both at 25 points, but UMD has 29 points right now. St. Cloud plays at home against Minnesota Duluth tomorrow, and they end the season with 2 games in Duluth, plus St. Cloud has 2 games against Colorado College. This seems more wide open than maybe it did a week ago.
I think so. And, it's really kind of a position where we have 3 teams here in Duluth, St. Cloud, and Omaha that have all seemed to head in the wrong directions at times. Omaha obviously gets back at it last weekend, playing really well. But each of these teams have really struggled. Even, we mentioned Omaha's sweep, but they got swept by Miami just a week before this. And it's really going to come down to the team of those 3 that can play decent hockey for the last few games here that is the team that will end up in fourth place. The other two will be on the road when it comes to the first round of the playoffs. But you're right. I thought it was going to be a two horse race, but it's now certainly a 3-horse race. Western has now separated themselves so that there's no way that I don't see any way that, Western Michigan is going to get caught, and you can kind of put them into a third seed in that league. But those other 3 teams that we mentioned, they're all fighting right now, and it's going to become tooth and nail. It's playoff hockey for them to not have to be traveling in the playoffs.
I think we talked in the last couple of weeks about St. Cloud being one of the teams that to watch, and they're 10th in the PairWise, but they're not. They're 5th in their league. Can you imagine a playoff series, a first round series between Duluth and St. Cloud, with St. Cloud going on the road? I mean, we were talking, with their start and with how they were doing things at the beginning, that this was a number 1 seed in the tournament. Now they're in danger of potentially falling if they keep losing. I don't think there's any chance of them not making the tournament, but they could be a really, really dangerous 3 seed. I mean, can you imagine getting them as a 2 seed and getting St. Cloud as your first round opponent? I mean, that's going to be challenging, and they may be sitting there waiting. I mean, to have Duluth or St. Cloud potentially not advance and then have to wait for the NCAA tournament for a while, that's an interesting storyline to follow there.
And there's a chance there too that St. Cloud maybe gets into the NCAA tournament with just maybe 18 or 19 wins. This is a team that might be, quite possibly maybe, 18 and 13, 18 and 14 when they get to the tournament. But they're, again, being in the NCHC, that's probably enough to get them into the tournament. Maybe they drop down to a 4 seed, but I still, as you said, I have them, over 90% to make the tournament right now. To see them continue to fall, listen, they can't keep losing. That's certain. You lose out in the regular season and then don't advance in the tournament, forget it, you're done. But if they go a little around 500 for the rest of their games, still probably make the tournament. That way, I wouldn't want to. If you see them drop down to a 4 seed, that's the 1 seed to pick against in the first round. We see every year we have that 1 seed get upset, but that's the one you pick against because St. Cloud State. We saw them last year. They were a dangerous team in the tournament. They're built for tournament play.
But if you look at them, if they drop to a 4 seed, then right now, if that happened, you got Denver and Western Michigan. Somebody's got to lose a game in the NCHC. So I don't know if they fall, but you're going to have Minnesota State probably, or Michigan getting one of those. I mean, like you said, that's the one that you take the upset there, and you always believe that the Atlantic Hockey Champion is going to beat a 1 seed. So it could end up being an interesting 4 versus 1 matchups. I don't give thank God they're going off the PairWise because last year we would have went crazy trying to put St. Cloud in as a 4 seed. The debate would have just been. We just spent way too much time on that one because I don't see them being a 4 seed, but the numbers say they are. The numbers say they are.
No, numbers say they're a 3 seed right now. But I know, but if they have any falters along the way, still make the tournament. Yes, a 4 seed is very possible.
Well, and how about this matchup? So it looks like St. Cloud has got a very good chance of finishing 5th. And say it's 4 and 5, Minnesota, Duluth, and St. Cloud, which we've been looking at all along. They will end up playing 5 times in the course of 3 weeks and 6 times in the course of 5 weeks. I mean, just the battles that end up, that familiarity breeding contempt, those are going to be some epic games, however that works out. If St. Cloud can get home ice or if they're playing in Duluth for 4 straight games.
We've seen it a number of times in Hockey East lately.
Sure.
I remember a few teams. I know BU and Northeastern, I believe, at one point played 5 games in a row, closed the regular season against each other, then had a best of 3 series. So those things happen. and I'll tell you, by the time you get to game 5 in that series, nobody likes each other.
Well, let's move on. We talked a little bit about the ECAC, and Quinnipiac had a loss to Harvard, 1-0 loss. It's likely unable for Quinnipiac to get a top 4 in the PairWise. It was already looking tough as they were around 5 or 6 going into this. They're at 7th after the loss. The bottom part of the league really dragging things down. So it sounds like we're looking at Quinnipiac as a number 2 seed. They've got to be considered a really tough number 2 seed to face.
Well, with their goaltending.
But imagine the numbers here. Let's say Quinnipiac goes on a run here. They win a couple down the stretch here, get through their playoffs, all of that stuff. They could be a 30-plus win team that does not get a number 1 seed. You want to talk about a team that is just really impacted by the bottom of their league, bringing them down. That Quinnipiac is the quintessential team that has really been brought down by the bottom of their league.
I mean, and I mentioned it there a little bit, is their goaltending. I mean, you wouldn't want to face that in the tournament as a 2 seed. I mean, they gave up 1 goal on the weekend again, and they lost. I mean, and they used St. Cyr got the shutout. I mean, and then from all accounts that I've read, Pretz played pretty well and loses 1-0 to Harvard. So yeah, and that's a tough go there. To once again, not them, the top ECAC team with 30 potential wins is a 2 seed. Let that sink in for a minute.
Okay. Well, and on that point,
okay, that was the minute.
That's as long as we can have for dead air. But last Tuesday, Dan Rubin and I got criticized by some readers for bringing up this issue of the bottom of the ECAC bringing down. It's like, oh, they just have a weak schedule. First of all, people try to do arithmetic on ordinal numbers, and 1st and 30th in strength of schedule is percentage points. It's tiny, even though it looks like a whole lot there. But the bigger thing, let's do a thought experiment. Let's say we took the bottom 3 or 4 teams from the ECAC and put them in the NCHC. Do North Dakota and Denver and UMD and St. Cloud and Western Michigan suddenly become worse teams because they have some low teams in their league? It doesn't make the top teams any less of a team. It hurts them numerically because of the way the RPI is calculated. And even that, shift it a couple percentage points the other way towards winning percentage, and all of a sudden Quinnipiac is a top seed. It's all very close. And, the difference between being a number 2 seed and a number 1 seed is, a sliver. So we're not talking about orders of magnitude in teams. We're talking about very close and a whole bunch of very good teams separated by not very much.
This goes back to what we were just talking about, the 4 seed beating the 1 seed. And let's just think about this. Yale in 2013, Providence in 2015, Minnesota Duluth in 2018. They were all the final teams into the tournament. They were the 16th of 16 teams into the tournament, and they all won the national championship. It can happen. I mean, that once you get into the tournament field, every one of those 16 teams are separated by millifractions. They are so small. There's no real separation between them. We talk about parity in college hockey all the time, and everybody wants to say this conference stinks and this conference stinks and this one's unbelievable. This is the greatest conference of all time. But the reality is the top teams in all of the conferences are pretty darn good. And on a 1 game, single night, whatever can happen scenario, anybody can beat anybody. And that is what the NCAA tournament really brings out, is you might not get the best overall team on the season winning a national championship. In fact, you almost never do. But for the team that can go on the best run over a 4-game stretch, there's your national champion. It doesn't matter if they're 1 coming into it or if they're 16 coming into it. Any of those teams can win. Very well said.
I mean, you go back to even the Atlantic Hockey Champions, the damage they've done, and RIT making the Frozen Four. I mean, you get there. That's the most. It's harder to get there sometimes than it is to win it.
Well, let's take a look at regular season standings as we get to the last week or 2, depending on the conference. Over the weekend, AIC and Minnesota State clinched Atlantic Hockey and the CCHA respectively. And there's some nice video up there of Mike Hastings talking to his team after winning the McNaughton Cup that's worth checking out. Kind of shows the personality of Mike. in front of his team. But some of the other conferences, they're very close. Right now, let's start with the Big Ten. Michigan and Minnesota, just a couple points apart. They've got 1 week to play. You got to love what Minnesota's been able to do down the stretch.
Well, first of all, congratulations to both Minnesota State and AIC. 5 in a row, I think, for Minnesota State, 4 in a row for AIC. I mean, that's a pretty good feat for both those teams. So congratulations to them. But I had a chance to watch a little bit of the Big Ten the other day, and the offensive firepower that there is from both teams is, but when talking about Minnesota and Michigan, is incredible. And we've talked about it with Michigan this year, you know, their power play at the beginning, blah, 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 undefeated. Jimmy threw that out in the first couple weeks. You know, we'll keep going on that train. But to watch Minnesota come back down to Penn State and rally that quickly, and I think it was 3-0 at the start, and then they came back and then they tied it, and then Penn State got another one right off the bat, or made it 4-2, 3-2, 4-2 in that range, and it was 3-2, and then they made it 4-2, and next thing you know, they're storming back again. That will be some fun hockey to watch between those two teams battling down the stretch. And then Michigan's got to hold serve against a very tough Ohio State team, knowing what they have to do. When they kept showing the standings with Minnesota in first place, and then Michigan got the job done without their Olympians.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Ohio State's going to have some hunger. They know where they are in the NCAA picture. They're right on the bubble. You lose a couple to Michigan, and you could be on the wrong side of things. But, you know, going back to that Minnesota-Penn State game that you mentioned, Derek, the shocker for me of that game wasn't just the rally that Minnesota was able to put on, but holding Penn State. Penn State will shoot from the popcorn stands. They will put a puck on the net from anywhere on the ice. They only got 4 shots on goal in the third period when desperate times were calling for desperate play. That shows how well Minnesota played down the stretch, and that they are a very dangerous team. They scare me, and their offense scares me. And I really, really, really want, and this is not having a bias, but with these two teams and who they are and what they represent, it would feel like an injustice if they don't play in the Big Ten title game. And who knows, you know, where that game is going to be played, which team will be the host. But that the atmosphere that will be created if Michigan and Minnesota can face off for a Big Ten championship, that's something I want to see.
And if it's in Minnesota, maybe they'll get more than 1,000 people in the arena this time around. I think they would. Speaking of offense, though, I just want to call out, did you see the end-to-end goal from Luke Hughes?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it was highlight at SportsCenter. I mean, it's the speed that he made that play with was outstanding. But yes, I mean, he's really stepped up in the absence of Owen Power on the blue line. And I mean, what are we talking? 18 goals, did they say? Something like that. That's pretty good for a defenseman, I think.
By the way, if we're talking highlights, and that Luke Hughes goal was unbelievable. I had the honor of calling one of the best highlights of the season in Hockey East on Friday night. Maine, UNH, two teams not exactly at the top of the league, but you get those two teams going. Great atmosphere up at Alphon, and Maine led the game 5-2 late in the second. Take a 5-minute major, and all you can see is UNH trying to, you know, pop a few in here and making it a close game. Well, Maine, their center loses his stick, breaks his stick right on the opening faceoff. So now a 5-on-4 is a 5-on-3. Guy goes into the corner, goes to try for a lift check, loses his stick. It's now 2 men without a stick. Another guy goes into the same corner, pushes for a puck against the boards, breaks his stick. There's only 1 man left on the ice, Ben Poisson, and he's able to come up with the puck after a block shot, try to clear it. A defenseman falls down. He goes in trying to get a breakaway. The goalie comes out, plays it right into Poisson, who then at a zero-sum angle somehow picks up the loose puck, throws it in the corner of the net for what I call the 1-on-5 shorthanded goal. If you haven't seen that one out there, check that one out on Twitter. And my play-by-play partner, Tyler Murray, had a great call of that one as well. So just to kind of pump his tires a little bit. It was a play that I haven't seen one like that in all my time in hockey, where the only one guy had a stick left on the ice. But it was something to watch.
Shameless plug, Jimmy. Shameless plug.
I didn't mind. That's one that I will plug, and it was not for anything that I did, more for what Ben Poisson did. That was really a talented play.
Well, let's turn to the ECAC, where there is a bit of a horse race. Quinnipiac with 48 points, Clarkson 47, Harvard with 40. They all still have a shot at it in the ECAC. But Clarkson, just 2 games left, 3 games left for the Bobcats and the Crimson.
Yeah, there's some makeups for both Harvard and Quinnipiac because of some cancellations earlier, and that gives them 3 left. I still really think when push comes to shove, this is Quinnipiac's title to lose. And I know that I give credit to Clarkson, I give credit to Harvard for making this a great race down the stretch. But Quinnipiac still, I think, is the best team in that league. And they would really have to falter here over their last 3 games to see anybody else take this title.
Agreed. I mean, I don't think there's really much more to say than that. It's been Quinnipiac from day one. And, hats off to Clarkson and Harvard for making it a race.
When we turn to Hockey East, it's all really too close to call. 6 teams still have a chance to win the league. There are 2 weeks of league play left. UMass Lowell, UMass, UConn, Merrimack, BU, and Northeastern are separated by 5 points.
It feels like, we say it about Atlantic hockey, it always comes down to this. And it feels like this is the same for Hockey East in recent years. And, they're playing a single elimination playoff, so they don't need weekends at a time for best of 3 series. So they have 2 weeks left. They'll then play a Wednesday, Saturday, Friday, Saturday playoffs over 2 weeks. I do think that there's some closeness here, but this still feels like UMass is the team in the driver's seat. They have some games in hand left to play. UMass Lowell won't play a conference game this week. This was a bye week scheduled, and they're making up a game against LIU that was canceled way back in, I believe it was December. UConn and Merrimack, BU, Northeast, they've all made great runs here, but to me, this still feels like UMass. It's almost like what we just said about Quinnipiac. It's theirs to lose. For UMass, they're playing pretty well. They stumbled at home on Saturday. They haven't lost a lot at home. They've been a pretty decent home team. UConn's a tough team. I still see right now, this is UMass's conference to win. And if they were to falter, that's the only way they're going to lose.
I want to be a fly on the wall in Steve Metcalf's office, trying to figure out where he's going to go to give the championship trophy out. And I want to see his GPS. I want to see where he's going. He may have to sit in between some of these and watch some scores. And it couldn't happen to a better guy. So Steve's got to figure out where he's going to go. But this is a full blown race. I mean, you said it still seems like UMass, but Lowell is still there. And we kind of wrote Lowell off a couple weeks ago again. And these teams that we write off don't really go on massive benders per se. And whether it's just a weekend, they find a way to right the ship. So this one's going to be interesting over the next couple of weeks. We're going to see some teams season end in playoffs while they're still playing regular season games.
Yeah, if UMass does falter, by the way, the team that might swoop in, you just never know. Could be Northeastern. They have the most games left to play. They still have 5 games left to play. They have a makeup game against Vermont thrown in there. I don't know if Steve Metcalf will use the Joe Bertagna method, which is to have 2 different administrators that could possibly hand out the trophy. And he always had 2 copies of the trophy, I believe, the regular season trophy or something like that. He always had something to fall back on, where if you had 2 potential teams on the last night that could win the trophy, they always had a way. And I remember, I think it was once, I think it was a while ago, where I believe it was UNH and BC it came down to, and they just took one of BC's old regular season champion trophies and handed it to them when they ended up winning it. But you're right. This is an interesting conversation of how do you figure out where to put the commissioner on the last night of the season.
Couldn't happen to a better guy.
I have 2 words for Steve Metcalf: stunt double.
That poor person who would have to look like Steve.
Oh, you're the one to get the text message, not me.
Yeah, I'm expecting it. That's why we're throwing him. I mean, of any of our loyal listeners, it's Steve Metcalf.
Well, let's wrap up the look at standings before the break here at the NCHC. North Dakota and Denver, 1 point apart now after the weekend, and 2 weekends left. Western Michigan still has a chance, but they do have to sweep North Dakota this weekend to make it. Sounds like it's coming down to the Pioneers and the Fighting Hawks.
Yeah, it does. And like we talked about earlier, good job by North Dakota making a little run here to make it interesting. And, the Western Michigan obviously looks like there's no way they're going to be caught outside at third. And we've talked about the 4 and 5. So big battle between the Fighting Hawks and the Fighting Pioneers.
Yeah, I mean, a good battle. These are two teams that have shown down the stretch that they're the heavyweights. And these are this is a good league to have two teams be able to kind of separate themselves. And I'm going to throw Western in there. And listen, we never know what they do against North Dakota when they play. Can they pull off a sweep? That would be as entertaining a way to, pull us down toward the end of the season as possible. But the fact that we have this kind of race, I think, is awesome in the NCHC, because there are, really, we've said it all season. There's 6 teams that are really good. There's 5 teams still in the top 10 of the PairWise. I mean, this is a really good league. And I love the fact that we could have, possibly come down to the final night before we know a regular season champ.
Well, let's take a break and we'll come back with more. This podcast is brought to you by DCU Digital Federal Credit Union. Visit dcu.org.
This is the USCHO Week in Review podcast from US College Hockey Online.
Sometimes it's not about wanting a new car, it's about needing one. And I needed one I could rely on. So I got an auto loan with DCU. They offer the same low rates on both new and used cars, and I was able to borrow a little extra to make a used car as good as new. My auto loan from DCU means a ride I can finally rely on, which feels like a pretty big thing. What will DCU mean to you? Insured by NCUA. Membership required. Visit dcu.org.
Welcome back to Weekend Review for February 21st, 2022. Let's have a little fun with this one. What team do you guys think, and I'll throw mine in too, what team feels best poised right now for a late season run? Jim, you want to go first on that?
Sure. I kind of already, tipped my hat on this one a little bit already, but I see North Dakota. There were some lean moments in this season for North Dakota, but they've righted the ship, and they've done it, in my opinion, with some really tough competition. Yes, they had a weekend against Colorado College in there, and that it helps when you can play a team that's struggling when you're not playing your best hockey. But their problems from January got resolved recently, and just one loss, and I believe their last 8 games, and that was a loss against Nebraska Omaha. But everything else has been pretty solid. A win and a tie with a shootout win against St. Cloud, the split against Omaha, the sweep of Colorado College, and then this weekend going on the road. This was the only 2 road games in that 8-game stretch, but going on the road and finding ways to win 1-goal games against Minnesota Duluth. That takes that month of January where you got swept by Cornell, you got swept by Western, and at least puts it, pretty far in the rearview mirror. Now, I do believe that there's a necessity to remember that Western series this week, more than ever. You can't get swept again, this time at home. But you've got to be also able to put some of that, the tough times, in the rearview mirror, and realize that your team is playing some of their best hockey right now.
I'm going to go with really kind of nobody. I think what you see is what you get. And you know what, when we talked about this segment and you sent this out, I thought about it. And I mean, you're looking at really the top 18 with ties right now for the tournament. You can interpret this question a lot of different ways. So I'm going to kind of give you 2 answers. I don't know if anybody outside the top, I guess it would be 19, because there's 2 ties at 18 right now, is really going to make a run to get in an at-large bid. I think what you see is what you get with that. And I think you got the stats probably to back it up a little bit on that, Jimmy. As far as anybody really outside of there is probably like a 10% chance or whatever. So that's kind of my first answer. My second one is, if you make me pick somebody that's going to make a run that I think is going to be in the NCAA tournament, I'm going to go with Harvard. They got their Olympians back on Friday. They're 6-1-2 in their last 9. One of their they got a shootout win in there, so it's really a tie. But I mean, you look at it as a win. Their only loss was to BU in the Bean Pot 4-3, and they've got 3 left. Now, this is a East Coast Hockey League schedule that they're going to play. They're going to play 3 and 3 nights, all on the road, all in different sites. You got Union, RPI, and Princeton to finish out the year, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But with the Olympians back, with the confidence that they're showing, this has really made the ECAC, the top of the ECAC, kind of a good run here at the beginning. And I'm bullish right now on them as far as making a run to be in the tournament. I don't think they've got it as an at-large, but they might have a chance to give Quinnipiac a shot in the tournament.
You know, with all the bashing we've done at the bottom part of the ECAC, the top 4 are pretty good. And I'm going to go with Clarkson out of the ECAC, 10-2-2 since the first of the year. A little bit of a stumble at Lina against Cornell last weekend. But when you come down to the final 4 in the ECAC, if it's the same as the standings right now, the 1-4 matchup would be Quinnipiac and Cornell, and the 2-3 matchup would be Clarkson and Harvard. And that's a pretty darn good tournament right there. Clarkson has had some good fortune this season against Quinnipiac, a tie and a win recently. But can you imagine any of those? A Clarkson-Harvard matchup would be something else. And if Clarkson could get by and prevail against Quinnipiac, they get the automatic bid. They're hanging just a little bit below in the PairWise, and I don't know if wins against Clarkson win against Harvard and then then they wouldn't need it if it was against Quinnipiac. But I don't know if there's enough there to get them in there. But they have been one of the hottest teams in the country since the start of 2022. So those are a couple of dark horses. If both Harvard and Clarkson were able to make it in, which is unlikely, but if there were some wins along the way that helped, who knows? Second round, maybe in ECAC, if you're up against a high enough team, if you get an RPI or something, I don't know. But one or the other of those would not be a surprise to make it into the tournament, I guess, between Harvard and Clarkson.
I think really it's almost like the two of you guys cannibalize each other in your picks, because of those two, one, they both might not go on great runs, but the one that loses when they inevitably probably play each other, whether it's in the ECAC semifinals or maybe even a championship game, depending on how things shake out, if somebody falls to a 4 seed. Well, listen, if they play each other, they're going to cannibalize each other. But I agree, both of them really poised for great runs here.
Well, let's wrap with this. We've talked with you, Derek, about this. We've talked to coaches on the program. I've talked to coaches around college hockey. And one of the things they point to is how hard it is in special teams now, because you have so much video. You know everything about the other team's power play. You know about the penalty kill. You've got to look at what are you going to do different. You got to look at tendencies. I'm told that this is one of the hardest things to coach right now. And with that, how important is special teams going to be for some of these teams down the road? I'll start out first, Derek. Your thoughts on special teams. Is my analysis from what I've heard correct, that it's very hard to coach these days?
Well, I mean, I wish I could tell you. I haven't been coaching it for a year, but no, it is because of the amount of video you have. And I remember when we went to the NCAA tournament, we played Minnesota. They were like, "Can you send us 4?" They wanted to exchange 4 games leading into it, so they would have 4 of our last 4 games for our special teams. Well, you don't get 4 games now. You got the ability to get 40, and you got it through a website, and you can click on how they'd scored their goals. You can look on their where their goals all are coming from. You've got a lot of different stats, and sometimes it's way too much. But you've got that ability, and those the special teams win you series, and it is whether it's a power play goal, whether you've got a chance at a. Just look at Jimmy and I talked before the show about Team USA. They had the 5-on-3 in the game against, I believe, against Slovakia. And they had a power play late where if they could have, especially in a 1-game knockout, when you're talking in the Final Four of your league, you get that goal to extend that lead by 1. That's a big thing. on the other side, you get that kill, you've given your team some confidence. So I really believe that with special teams, it's a momentum. It's funny because everybody says, they had such a good power play, they're going to keep the momentum from it. I actually think it the other way around, because it frustrates the team because they had such a good power play. They're distracted by it for a few minutes, and the other team gets a little shot because they got lucky, or the team missed, or they got out of it. Sometimes just surviving is the best thing. Talk about surviving power play and penalty kill, and I think that's a tough scenario to say that you're going to get momentum by not scoring. I think both teams can get that momentum by getting a big kill.
Well, let's talk about some teams that have really done well in it. Jim, you did the digging on this. The top power play in the country right now belongs to St. Cloud State. They're 15-11-3 overall, 10th in the PairWise, but they've got a 33% power play, which is phenomenal at any level of hockey. Without that, where would the Huskies be? They might be around 500 and well out of the bubble.
No doubt. And when you're scoring 1 out of every 3 times you get on power play, and the NCHC, I'm not going to say they're a highly penalized league, but let's just take an average. Say that there's an average of 5 power plays a game, and you're going to score on 33% of those. So you're probably going to score at least 1 goal a game, possibly 2 goals, and just balance out those games that you score 0 with the games that you're going to score 3 or 4. That just moves the team, moves the needle so far that, if they're 13-3 right now, St. Cloud, we're not talking about them for the NCAA tournament. The couple of wins that they've won in close games where their power play has had some success, that is what's putting St. Cloud State over the top, and they're going to need it. You just mentioned it, Derek, in those single game scenarios, when you get into an NCAA tournament, or you're in the Final Four of your conference tournament, that power play is so critical. And if you go 0-4 in a given night on the power play, typically it's going to be more difficult to win. You see it in these single game tournaments. The team that wins the special teams battle is usually the team that wins.
That's an easy statement. I think we always talk about winning. You want to win the special teams battle. Very rarely do you lose a special teams battle and win the hockey game. It just is, because it's so tight. I know that one of the stats you got is close games and 1-goal games. I mean, that swings big time. You lose the special teams battle by 1 or 2. It's hard. It's hard to rebound from that and win the hockey game. That's for sure.
Meanwhile, another saying that is out there is that your best penalty killer is your goaltender. And so it would be no surprise that the top penalty kill belongs to Quinnipiac, 92.6%. Where would they be, particularly because they are 5-2 in those 1-goal games that Derek mentioned? They've blown out opponents overall 109-33 against, again, the bottom part of that league. But how huge has the penalty kill been for Quinnipiac, and might they be way outside the PairWise bubble?
Well, I mean, first of all, Mike Corbett, who's an assistant now at Quinnipiac, was my assistant last year in charge of the penalty kill, and we were at about 79%. So I don't know what all of a sudden changed. Maybe it's the goalies. I don't know, but we had a good goalie too. So maybe Mike's not running it, and so just my little shot at him there. But I think like you said, the best goalies are the goalies that win, and your best penalty killer is your goalie. You got to keep pucks to the outside. You got to get, and the biggest thing I think that really will dictate how the penalty kill goes is clears, getting pucks 200 feet and make them go all the way down. Face-offs. I mean, face-off is possession, especially on penalty kill. Those are big things. So you got to make sure, besides having clears that go 200 feet, you got to have a good goalie, and you got to win face-offs, because you win that face-off in your offensive zone, it takes 20 seconds to get back in the zone and get set up. That's big.
And obviously Quinnipiac, that's a good stat, but the better one, I'll tip it for you, Ed, so you don't have to, keep going with these. But Notre Dame's the one that stood out to me. When I looked at their numbers, they're 91.5% on the penalty kill. So you're killing more than 9 out of every 10 penalties. but they have played 12 one-goal games and won 9 of them. Now, they're 11th in the PairWise, and you take a few power play goals against, in any of those one-goal games, where does this team end up? Could they be a team that, we know that they're third place in the Big Ten, but could they be on the wrong side of the bubble if they, I don't even have their record in front of me, but, what if they suddenly, had 3 losses. So instead of being 23-9-0, they're 20-12-0. I don't think that would be enough to have them above the PairWise bubble right now. And they'd be desperate. And listen, they're still going to be desperate. They need some wins down the stretch, but it just shows that when you're in those situations, if you can play that hockey and really make your penalty kill feel confident, if you can get a power play that matches it, you're a powerhouse. But when you can have one of those two clicking, and I think some coaches have told me the magic formula, add your power play percentage, add your penalty kill percentage, and hopefully they're over 110. When you're starting at 91.5%, it only takes a power play that's operating about 12% to jump above that 110 bubble. So I love the way that Notre Dame has always played under Jeff Jackson on the PK. He's he and whoever coaches it within his staff is Andy Slaggert maybe, but they do a great job. They've historically been a good team killing penalties, but this year it's obviously taking them over the edge.
Well, I mean, I always went 105. I mean, that's what I thought was a big 110 is outstanding. I mean, that's a big number. But we talked earlier today about streaks, and we talked about the AIC 4 regular season championships and Minnesota State 5 in a row. The bigger streak ended this past weekend, and Ed, you lost your streak. How many games? 184? 184 straight games, and Ed took a night off. I mean, how do you take a night off this kind of time of year, Ed?
Oh, it was Mom's 83rd birthday.
Well, I mean, that's a good reason, but still, it's still got to try to find a way to keep that streak going. I mean, like, what would Cal Ripken have done in that scenario? He would have kept playing.
Yeah. And, but Wally Pipp was hanging out and no.
Congratulations to you for researching that, first of all. And I'm sure, did Chris, who came out of, did Chris Lurch come out of retirement to get that?
No. It was my usual sidekicks of Scott Bigger and Matt Campbell that covered the day.
How'd they survive without you?
Oh, just fine. Scott has been waiting for this day for a while, so hats off to him.
Yeah, Wally Pipp is right.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap things up with this edition of the USCHO Weekend Review podcast, which has been brought to you by DCU, Digital Federal Credit Union. What will DCU mean to you? Find out today by visiting dcu.org. Membership required. For Derek Schooley, for Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Weekend Review podcast, a production of U.S. College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.